is me, it's the one and only Paul Friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. And tonight we have Barry. Hey, Barry.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing good. And we have Gary. How you doing, Gary?
Not so bad. Hope everyone's doing well. Or as well as can be expected.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Staying safe up there?
Trying to.
Cool.
That's never fun.
Well, it's a choice of staying safe or possibly being dead. I prefer the latter than the former than the latter. So, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Maybe
I understand that.
Maybe it's like playing safe, But anyhow, as if you tuned in last week, Barry wanted to revisit the Maesron, which is quite an interesting empire. And actually, when it comes to the tournament cruisers, one of those ones that we thought we had pretty much down pat and pretty well balanced. So, Barry, what's the reason for the revisit anyway?
Well, it's we haven't talked about it in a while, and I don't know that it's. I mean, there's pluses and minuses. Now, having said that, I probably haven't played Starfleet Battles in too long, and that's one of the ships that I actually wasn't perfectly happy with. I was happy with it until people started saying, well, no, you can't do it this way. And it's like, oh, crap, I had it balanced perfectly, and now it's not.
This is weird.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just talking about balance for the tournament cruiser.
Right. Oh, understood. Overall, we rarely talk about balance of the empires themselves, though I think we've all agreed that some of the weapons aren't quite balanced, even between the Omega empires themselves. They needed to be ironed out, and we'll just let it go at that, because we have discussed that before.
Yeah.
And I don't want
to. We've been down that road many a time before. But when I'm looking at tournament play, it's like, I know.
Understood.
I'm not saying anything I'm saying here is for regular gameplay, just for tournament play.
Though, in some cases, it can be.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying that you're going to have dual situations all the time, but some of those situations, even in small squadrons, some at the very least, the introduction to the weapons and how the weapons, what empires are better versus other ones when it comes to how the weapons interact, can be helpful for all, not just for tournament play. Now, I agree that people playing, it's rare when it comes to Omega. Omega is not exactly the favorite empires, in all SFB, but in that case, I think that overall, I think they are short shrift by some,
Right. And I had the impression that of all the Omega ships, the tournament cruisers had the most love in terms of play.
Oh yeah. Well, definitely. I know you, Peter Bakia. I think I'm not sure if I played a couple.
You have. I played a couple of them against you. I know.
Oh, that's true. We've done our own personal play tests, live action play tests at Gamers of Winter and Gamers of Summer, and
Council of Five Nations too.
Yep. Wow. We went that one time. I haven't gone since.
Yeah, I haven't been back since either. Of course, it makes it a lot harder now that I'm in Kentucky.
That is true.
But I may get a chance this year. I don't know. Gary, have you? And it's been what, 5-6 years since we last discussed the Maesron. Were you involved in that discussion, or can't remember, or?
I don't think so.
Well, what I was actually thinking was that in Captain's Log 51, there is a Maesron command cruiser. Actually, because in recent issues of Captain's Log, some of the space has been taken up by playtest material for new empires like those Osman Marauders. But other space has been taken up for additional ships for pre-existing empires. So, for example, in CL51, both the Maesrons and Prober get a command cruiser. And then in Captain's Log 52, the Trobrin, because the Trobrin command cruiser that's in print in Module Omega 2 is really more of a battle cruiser. So they have an early command cruiser in CL52, which is basically a command variant of the heavy cruiser. And then the Kulagar, they have a command cruiser in that same issue as well. And also, for the first time for those two empires, the question of warp refits is addressed in CL52 as well. So,
right.
But anyway, basically, what I was trying to get to is that for the Maesrons, if there were to be any kind of like formal look by ADB, I'm not too sure. I mean, again, of course, none of us can speak for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they might say, well, why are they like the starter point might be with some of the ships that are historically in that range, and then work from there, rather than going too far in terms of working up side ships, which doesn't sound great. But I mean, it's not entirely bad either, because I don't know if Paul, do you have your copy of Captain's Log 51 there with you?
Yep. And actually, right now, up on the screen, I know you guys can't see it at the moment, is the Maesron command cruiser from 51. I sent a PDF to Barry.
Oh, so, let me take a look. See.
Yeah.
Basically
I was gonna say right before we started, I sent an email of the PDF.
Oh, okay. Just pulled it up. Well, let's see. It's very similar to the one I had created.
Mm-hmm.
Although, let's see, how much warp does it have? 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6. So it's got 12, 13, so 26, 27, 28 warp. Because I know that most of the Omega ships are considered equivalent to, at least in Omega 1 and Omega 2 and probably 3 and 4, are considered middle year ships.
Well, so is this ship in a sense, because in the OR section that's in Captain's Log 51, it's explained that when the ship initially entered service as the early command cruiser, it didn't have it basically still had the same 26 warp as the heavy cruiser. So the main difference would have been in the flag bridge. Maesron ships usually only had just one flag bridge, even the Dreadnought, relative to other empires adding 2 or whatever. And it upgraded the phasers 7 and 8 to wide-angle phaser 1s instead of wide-angle phaser 3s. And then in Y165, the warp pack in the center warp was added. So if you look at some of the ships in Module Omega 2, like the Maesron Frignaut or the Volpod Blockade Runner, they both have the same warp pack. And actually, if you look on Shapeways, there's actually representation of those warp packs for those designs as well. So the concept here is that basically the Maesrons, when they were looking at some of the other, command ships that were being fielded around the same time, they went with the warp pack as a way to give it extra energy. So it's kind of like how, if you look at a Federation heavy command cruiser relative to the standard command cruiser, it's got the extra warp in the engine, in the saucer, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's a similar concept here. So now this, So
it's like a pod that gets attached to the command to the ship, right?
Yeah. Paul, do you have a copy of the latest GIF file for the latest tournament cruiser that I created for the Maesron?
Oh, that's a good question. What I probably should do is just do this. Let me just bring up the client.
Yeah. And can you send that to Gary?
See if I can.
If not, I can email it to you.
Why don't you email it to Gary? That'll probably be a heck of a lot easier.
All right. And Gary, what's your email?
Well, I wouldn't want to give it out on the podcast.
Let me
I'll send it to Paul.
I'm not on my computer right now anyway, so So yeah, basically I was just looking at I have my copy of CL51 in hand here, so I was just going by that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, let me tell you the major differences between my ship and the CC is mine has no center warp, but it's got 30 regular warp. I brought it up to tournament standards. Let's see. In terms of APR, I've got 2 extra APR from the command cruiser. So I've got 2 more warp and 2 more APR, giving it 40 power. The phaser ones I have are on different parts of the ship, but basically they are identical firing arcs except for the 2 PW1s next to the tachyon guns in the back. Instead of being FA, there's 2 of them are FAL and 2 of them are FAR. And the PW3s in the back, instead of being RA, one is RAL and one is RAR. I upgraded the tachyon missiles to B launchers. And then I created a couple of pre-built tachyon missiles. Said you basically can choose for tournament purposes. I said you can pick from one of these 2 types, and that's it. So you have 2 TMB module racks. You have 10 total missiles. You can pick all of type 1, all of type 2, or any mixture of those types you want. And obviously you have to choose what they are. And the type 1s are, I put a 28-speed propulsion module in them. And the type 1s have 12 armor of 12, explosion of 16, anti-tractor of 1, so effective speed of 24. The type 2 has an armor of 16, an explosion of 8, anti-tractor of 1, and also an effective speed of 24. So they're not too out there. But they are. Yeah. Remember that the ship can only fire 1 tachyon missile per turn. So.
Well, how often is a tournament game going to go more than 6 turns?
Not often.
Depends. It depends on what empires you're talking about, though.
And I know where you're going with A's instead of B's.
Yeah, because if you remember with the FRA discussion, I was even suggesting dial the B's on that ship back to A's and just have A's be the standard for TM Rex for any empire that possesses tachyon missiles. So in that situation. I mean, I can understand the idea of offering pre-cooked missiles because I tried to do that with the Federation Commander playtest rules, where you've got the standard missiles that come with the ship are just the standard ones that you get, more or less in SFB. Whereas you have like 3 options, depending on which time period you're fighting in, of purchasing more powerful missiles or whatever. But a couple of things, though, is that when it comes to the shielding that's on the Captain's Log 51 ship, the front 3 shields are boosted up, but the shield 4 is still no better than on the heavy cruiser. Now, personally, I think that this is actually part of the character because there are no Hellbores to react against, to kind of force Omega empires to, follow the same route that the Klingons and Lyrans and other empires did in the Alpha Octant.
Right.
I mean, there are indulging weapons like the L'Oreal overloaded
but
flame.
But they're not
great.
But they don't target the weak shield like a Hellbore does.
True. So I kind of feel that for Omega, there might be something to trying to retain that essence and stuff. So where the player
I agree with that. But for tournament standards, and considering that a Maesron tournament cruiser could run into a hydrant,
no, it can't. If you...
I did everything. People do play that.
Oh, I understand, Barry, but as I've pointed out multiple times, I personally don't think you'll ever get the Alpha and the Omegas to a point where they can be played together. The systems were not ever designed to interact with one another. I understand that there's still some faults in the Omegas, and we've already referred to that earlier. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to try to.
I know.
The other thing is that I'm kind of wary of the concept of messing around too much with the firing arcs, because part of the reason why the Maesron is the way it is because it has really dodgy phaser arcs and stuff. I mean, it's kind of basically, it feels like it's something that the Maesron player is supposed to have to try to suffer through, rather than I'd be very wary, because the thing is that like the wider arcs, it's one thing, but when the firing platform that they're firing out of is on a destroyer, because that does have wider arcs than the cruisers, but that basically might be more of an engineering thing. Like, for example, like with the Shapeways miniatures, the primary hull is still underneath the floating platform, but I guess there's an argument to be made that, I guess, due to whatever, warp balance, blah, 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 technobabble, whatever, that basically the weapons mounted on the platform, they have more complications when they're on a cruiser or dreadnought than when they're on a destroyer. So,
I have no problem restricting the arcs back again.
But what I would say though is that for warp power, now again, none of this hasn't necessarily been considered by DB, but in theory, what I would, like, if there was a way to address the warp refits in historically, I would basically give the Maesrons the same kind of warp refits that are shown for the Kolagar and Troberin in Captain's Log 52. Basically, the left and right warp engines would go from 13 to 15. And so the command cruiser would have the warp pack as well as having two 15-box engines. So it would be just like a Federation CB.
Correct.
And that combined, so that would basically allow the correct historical number of APRs to be on the ship to basically bring it to the same total that you had with the tournament cruiser you were speaking of.
Right.
It would basically still reflect the...
I created that tournament cruiser back in 2010. And I guess I could have given it 32 warp, but I gave it 30 warp and 6 APRs. So slightly less powerful than what you're talking about, actually.
Well, the thing is, the Maesrons don't really have any weapons that require warp power, so they wouldn't necessarily gain the way the Meds would or the Kolagar would. Although speaking of warp power, it always bugs me that the anti-proton weapons have anti-proton in the name but don't need warp power. But basically, I kind of think that if the goal was to try to convince ADB to consider a set of like for some sort of like future like play test pack or something like that, whatever. I wonder if it might be worth considering both this and also a few of the other command cruisers that have been in recent issues, just as templates to work with. Even though, I mean, like, I'm not trying to say this in a way I'm not trying to put down the work that you've put in on your own ship, whatever. But I just mean more in terms of trying to basically keep the ships as close to what might be considered historically, but still working. Yeah.
I think everyone will. I think most of us. Well, I think everyone will agree for the most part that you want to keep those historical quirks with any ship there. Try to keep it the flavor
I would agree with that.
of the actual empire and the ship itself there as much as possible.
Yeah,
like it's actually because even in the Alpha Octant, it's unfortunate. Like with the ISC, for example, because it doesn't really have most of the character of like any of the historical ships. But the problem is that the ISC ships are just so powerful historically. So what's interesting is that in 2016 there was a revised version of Module C2, and it actually includes, I guess you could call it a middle years version of the heavy cruiser that has only 2 plasma torpedoes rather than 3, and or the 2 in the PPD. Because the idea is that when the ISC first built the heavy cruiser, they were comparing it to the Gordon heavy cruiser. So it didn't quite occur to them just yet to put a weapon in the central prong. So it has 2 G-torps, which become S-torps after Y-170 or whatever. And then, so this also was handy because, say, if you're playing Module C6 and you've got the Paravians from the Lost Empire timelines, and in those timelines, the ISC are actually fighting the Paravians throughout the Middle Years. So there's no like isolation the way there is in the standard timeline. So in that timeline, those ships are actually fighting Romulan and Paravian ships, like and they're allied with the Gorns and so whatever. So people do actually have a chance to use that ship. So I almost wonder if now, of course, it's far too late for this, but I almost wonder if that actually might make for an interesting, like a more friendly with other empires way to approach the ISC in a tournament thing. The only thing is that if you take away the PPD, you're maybe losing some of the flavor of the ISC. But I mean,
there's a few things that makes it unique.
It's like why would anyone play the ISC if you don't have a PPD?
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, basically, you just have a Gorn with different arcs. Is what you got.
Yeah. Right.
But oh, by the way, now I don't want to veer off too far off, but just for future reference, so that you know what I'm referring to, the next page over in Captain's Log 51, sorry, 54 is not out yet. 51. There's a Prober command cruiser, and the main difference with that is that it's got the wings of the Dreadnought rather than the standard heavy cruiser. But there's also a note as well where historically the first Prober command cruisers had the same heavy cruiser wings. So it's only in Y165 that the bigger wings were installed. So, but yeah, basically it's just kind of like another way to kind of look at what was basically happening in universe. And now I know there's been a lot of issues talked about with the Prober in a tournament, but anyway. And then also in CL52, I mentioned that there's the Trobrin and Colagar have command cruisers, and Colagar one, it actually has a slightly enlarged aft bubble, and it has room for a couple of warp reactors that get added in, I think it's Y155 as well.
Yeah, and I so getting back to the Maesron, I would agree with, okay, get rid of 2 of the APRs, give it 2 center warp. So now it still has 40 power, but it's 32 warp instead. Go back to the command cruiser firing arcs for all the weapons. Go back to 8 racks on the tachyon missiles.
Yeah.
And add the flag bridge as well.
Yeah.
What's that?
The flag bridge.
The flag bridge.
Okay.
Too.
One thing that I'm not sure if you mentioned or not, the number of phasers is also different. You have
it's not.
Yes, it is. At least the one that I currently have in the
I have
client
8 P1s.
Yeah, you have 8 P1s. The command cruiser has
eight P1s.
8 P1s. But here's the thing.
I have 2 extra P3s.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
And then of course we already mentioned the whole ARCs thing.
You're right. I forgot about that. Yeah, because I had you had upgraded those PW3s to PW1s, whereas I had taken the 2 PW1s in the front and doubled them. So I had 2 LS and 2 RS in the front.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really and this is for tournament purposes only, and I know, but without the extra phasers, that ship just could not. It doesn't work. It needed those extra P3s.
Well, perhaps one option could be to offer a variant of the tachyon missiles that has phasers on them.
Well, I'll get back to that in a second. So the other thing I did for the tournament cruiser is that you start the game with each of the 8 tachyon guns, and you can put each tachyon gun individually. You decide whether that tachyon gun starts as arming complete and holding with 4 points of power in it, or empty. And that's an actual very interesting distinction. And the reason for that is that if it's holding 4 points of power, then it means that it needs 2 points of power in a tachyon gun to hold it. You can, of course, add more energy to it, but you have a tachyon gun with some power already in it. Now, empty is an interesting situation because the way the tachyon guns work is each turn of arming, you can put you have to put a minimum of 1 point of power in, up to 7 points of power in, where over the 2 turns you can't have more than 8 points of power. But on the third term, the holding cost is what you pay. And let's say I put 5 points of power in for turn 1 arming. I can put 1 point of power in for turn 2 arming, but the hold cost would be 3. So it's much cheaper. You can set it up so that on turn 2 of arming, you're much cheaper than if you don't fire it and you have to hold it. That's the real Achilles heel of the tachyon gun, is that if you don't fire it on turn 2, you can hold it, but it's pain. It's expensive to hold.
The question I have, though, is in a tournament setup, what is the default weapon status?
Weapon status 3.
Well, 3.
Yeah, so let me just double check and see, because for Fed Commander, the default is the equivalent of weapon status 2. So I guess tachyon guns, they could count as having a certain amount of power from the first turn of arming. If you wish, you don't have to. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to double check and see for weapon status 3. The tachyon gun can have a warhead strength of 4 or less at the start of the scenario, holding cost 2. So I wonder if maybe, because the thing is, the whole thing about the weapon is how flexible it's supposed to be. Because, as you know, the range, being able to fine-tune the range is so important. Perhaps less historically than in the tournament, but I wonder if it might be as well just to let players with tachyon guns have the full flexibility that they have in a historical game, where they can go up to 4 if they want, but they can have, I guess, a minimum of 2, I suppose, in order to have like a fully armed gun or whatever. So they can decide themselves if they want to feed reserve power, battery power at the impulse of firing to boost it up or not. So like if a player chooses to have all 4 weapons with the minimum amount of power in it and then ease their way in, and then if they get caught flat-footed, that's on them. But it's basically it's because with a weapon like this, it's basically providing that kind of, and also this would apply for other empires that would use tachyon guns, like the Zosmans, or like, say, for example, if the Volpa ever get done, because if you look at the Volpa blockade runner in Omega 2, it uses Maesron type weapons and stuff. So if they ever got a tournament cruiser, then if they had tachyon guns too, then that same flexibility would apply there. So.
Well, the thing about 4 points of power in a tachyon gun is now you have a range of 16, and you can hold for 2. So that means that on turn 1, you can run into the center of the board at reasonable speed and fire your tachyon guns at range 16, where they still have a 1 to 5 hit number. So you can say, I'm going to run in, fire them all, and then turn off and run out. Or the option of starting with them empty means you could do something like put 5 points of power in them, corner dive, and on turn 2, just put 1 point of power in. Now I have a 6-point tachyon gun. Max range is only 5, but for all 4 of them, I've got 4 points of power to hold them all. That means I can move basically speed 31 with basically a fairly powerful weapon that at range. So yeah, I can move at speed 31 with a weapon that at range 5, I'm doing 10 points of damage with a hit number of 1 to 5.
True.
Of course, if my opponent sees that, they can turn and run. I don't get range 5, and now the following turn, it's a hold cost of 3, which gets real expensive.
And also there's the question of whether you're running up a suicide shuttle or a wild weasel at the same time, because
that's true. Yeah.
Because the thing as well is that with the highest arming costs for the tachyon gun, the range is so low that you'd be probably thinking about a suicide. You may or may not be thinking about a suicide shuttle anyway, because you're going to be at you have to get to range 1 for the full 8 points from a tachyon gun. But on the other hand, if you're planning to fire at a longer range, and then you could basically just keep the shuttle, as a standard admin, and then, do something else with the power instead. So,
yeah. Now, there was another type of tachyon missile that I created. Actually, I created a couple of extra tachyon missiles, and I submitted the rules for those tachyon missiles to
Patrick. Yeah.
Steve Petrick. And he basically blew me off on those and said, nah. And because what I did was I went into the rules and of the tachyon missiles, and the rules for tachyon missiles said these are the ultimate modular missiles. And I said, okay, I'll create a couple extra modules for it. And I created rules for them. I know, Paul. I know.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah. And let me get Gary up to speed. I know we've barked over this bone many a time before, but let me get Gary up to speed on what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
And this is for tournament only, is that the tachyon missile has a huge weakness, and that is drones. Where one drone can pretty much, I know that theoretically a tachyon missile can survive getting hit by a drone, but even with 16 armor, a drone will knock it down to 4 points, and at that point, a drone and a P3 will take it out. So you've got these big, expensive missiles. You've got a ship that can fire 1 per turn, so its firing rate is low. And a drone-armed ship, say a Klingon ship, can use half its racks to to counter the racks on the Maesron and use the other rack to fire drones at the Maesron. So the drones basically are very, very effective at neutralizing tachyon missiles. And you don't have, and tachyon missiles really don't do much damage. In fact, a large drone does more damage than a tachyon missile. So, and you can get drones that are faster than tachyon missiles. Of course, you don't have many of them. So what I did was I created some extra modules to put on tachyon missiles that would give them some defense against drones. So I think I created one module that was basically a point defense module, and it had, I think, 2 or 3 P3s on it, and but those P3s could only be used against size class 7, basically missiles and plasmas, drones, plasmas, other tachyon missiles. But those phasers were basically point defense phasers. And I think I said that module took up 2 spaces. And it was just there. So, yeah, if you fired I figured it out that if you fired a drone at the tachyon missile, I think I put 2 phaser 3s on it. So if you fired a drone at a tachyon missile, the tachyon missile could take that drone out, but a second drone is probably going to get through.
Well, for what it's worth, like when I tried to sit down and figure out what the pre-cooked missiles would be in Fed Commander, I went into the rules and tried to basically look at, because for anyone who hasn't seen it, the tachyon missile rules for customization, they specify which year certain advancements, whether it's propulsion or warhead or phasers, AKG, that sort of thing. And so the idea was that basically, like, if you were fighting a battle against the Andromedans in Y196 or whatever, then the missiles that you have available are a lot better than the ones you have if you're fighting in, say, Y150. So I tried to basically accompany that. Now, that's not an issue with the tournament, because I guess you could just assume a date, like maybe Y175 or whatever it is. But I wonder if maybe a different way to approach this would be to build pre-cooked warheads that are based on the rules. Because, I mean, you can, from Y175, you can put additional phaser 3s on a missile, but and they are able to hit anything, but the each phaser W3 or phaser 3, whatever it is, because I guess if the Belasco were using it, they don't have to use a wide-angle phaser on the tachyon missile. You can then, or for that matter, if the Federal Republic are using it, they can put like an alpha octant phaser 3 on there. You can basically, you have to pay 2 size points for each of those. So, and then of course later in the timeline from Y212, you can use phaser W1 or phaser 1, whatever. But actually, it's only the Maesrons can do this though. But that's way beyond the timeline we're talking about. So, but yeah, I kind of think that. I mean, I get what you're. I mean, I can definitely see a way to kind of make things interesting. But I guess Paul would probably note that. You don't really have to worry too much about the drones in the historical setting. I mean, there are a couple of cases, like there's a bunch of Klingon ships that showed up with Kraknor in Y171, and supposedly they did fight the Volta, but they used up the last of their drones. And then also in the Y210s, the Sakharov, the advanced galactic survey cruiser, if you do any scenarios with that ship, it'll have its Type 7 X drones or whatever. Well, not in FC, because in FC it's looking like drones will be just the same as Type 1s, but they'll be Speed 32 with standard. So kind of cutting back a bit on that. But anyway, so what I would kind of think is one interesting thing to do would be to decide maybe you'll have one warhead which is all about propulsion. So it basically goes speed 32, but maybe the warhead's not that much higher. Or you can have one that's all about the armor. So it's kind of like a slug drone, or what the Lesser Magellanic Cloud would call a kinetic slug missile for mass drivers.
Yes.
And then you could have one that's about the phaser. I guess that's swordfish, is it, for Alpha Octans?
Yeah.
You could do one where you're building a missile up to the standards that you can get away. I'd say make it Y180, because Omega is a little bit more flexible than Alpha in terms of, like, it doesn't have the strict from Y175. Thou shalt have all these extra things immediately. That doesn't really happen in Omega, of course. But yeah, so you basically do the same sort of thing where you pre-cook based on the rules as they are. And then what you could even do is you could do there's under OFD 1.2722, you can actually do a tame bore type 3 option where you've got like it's kind of like ATG, but like a little bit different and stuff, whatever. So actually that would be useful if you had those Osmonds using their stealth field, because when you're on the stealth field, you have to use passive fire control, which doesn't exist in tournament, but you could probably, figure out a workaround. But if you are stealth, you could then use the tame bore to launch your tachyon missiles at a certain range, and then once they get to a certain distance, they can, try to travel the rest of the distance to the target ship. So,
right.
And then you could even, so there's basically, and even like, say, for example, if you're fighting a Belasco, maybe you could work up a negative tractor missile option. And the handy thing is that if you've only got 2 Type A missile racks, you basically say to the player, well, you've got all these tricks, but which one are you gonna use? I mean, like, sooner or later the tricks are going to run out. But I mean, it gives a little bit of character to those tachyon missile empires, if they so wish. But it sounds like it would do it in a way that,
Well, that's essentially what I was saying, was that I had created several pre-built ones, but I was looking at this and saying that from a tournament point of view, if you're facing somebody who has no drones, then the Type 1 and the Type 2 I created, the Type 1 is basically, it's got an explosion of 16, but an armor of 12. So it's hard to stop with phasers, not too hard to stop with phasers. And remember that you can fire heavy weapons at a tachyon missile with no penalty. It has, all of them have 1 point of anti-tractor. So a 2-point tractor can stop it. Because I figured that 1 tachyon missile should be equivalent to 2 drones, is what I'm trying to go for. Simply
well, the other thing I can mention as well is that sooner or later there might be a Carnarvon tournament cruiser. And if so, they'd probably have to use the death bolt rules that are in Module C6.
Right.
But there was actually a big argument, I remember, on the BBS when the Module C6 was being developed as to, what should be done to death bolts to make them competitive against the Gazintis using their crazy drones or whatever like that. But they didn't get an awful lot. I mean, like, there's ways that you can use your deck crews to, like, deck crew actions rather, to speed up the launch rate of your death bolts and stuff, whatever. But
which is
they still have kind of like, So I
don't remember what the death bolts had.
Yeah, I mean they're I think they come something like F-35, but they've got quite a big warhead or whatever relative to a drone. But they've got like they're even more. I guess they're not quite as customizable as the tachyon missile. And interestingly enough, you can't deploy, historically anyway, you can't deploy a death bolt from a fighter or a PF, whereas you can deploy tachyon missiles from fighters or PFs.
Right.
But
correct.
Yeah, actually, the Carnarvons would be an interesting topic.
Agreed.
I guess if we ever in the future. But anyway, I guess what I was trying to say is that I mean, I agree. I mean, it's even if you're only using the historical module options, you might not get a seeking weapon that is as useful in a tournament as a drone. But I kind of think that's part of the point. I mean, like, there's no empire that's going to basically, like, there's no equivalent of the Gazintis in the setting, in the sense that there's no empire that relies exclusively on its drone-like seeking weapons. I mean, there's plenty of plasma-like seeking weapons in Omega, like the Prober, and depending on how you do the Troburn, you can do them too, although the Troburn are probably better if they're mixing in the implosion bolts as well. But even the Maesrons, they're not really intended to lean so heavily on their missiles and stuff. So I kind of think that in a tournament view, it might not be a deal breaker if they only get a certain amount of use from the missiles, but that they really have to focus on their tachyon gun usage in terms of being able to actually carry
the tachyon guns are your big weapon. And as I said, the missiles, I consider them to be along the lines of a Klingon or a Windblack Shark or something along those lines, where the tachyon missiles, the drone weapons, are a little extra firepower, but they're not your main firepower. But, they just add a little bit to you.
Well,
that's actually another reason why I consider
in general are mainly designed not as a weapon that's going to hit you, but a weapon that if you ignore is going to hurt you, and it's more of mobile terrain, as I pointed out.
Yeah. Like the Type 2 tachyon missile I had was only an explosion of 8. So you can run through them without getting too badly hurt. Mm-hmm. They're only going to do 8 points of damage to you. Of course, the Type 2 has 16 armor, so it's like, well, that thing is really difficult to take out. And I just might as well just run right through it. I'll take my 8 points of damage, which is a totally different philosophy than you would take with a drone.
Right.
Okay. But if you only have, say, okay, I agree with Gary. Let's go to ARACs. So you only have 6 of them. That's 48 points of damage total from your missile weapons. That's it. Then your racks are empty. So that's, the Type 1s, they do 16 points of damage. So that's double that. But you can kill them. They only have 12 points of armor. But the problem is, so that's a little extra. Basically, it's a grind factor that you can grind down your opponent. The problem is that's, again, if you're facing a Fed or a direct fire weapon or a plasma armed ship, those 2 types are perfect. But if you're facing anybody with drones, they completely negate that for very little cost. So it's a rock, scissors, paper.
Well, the other thing to bear in mind is that if we go back to the Carnivons for a second, they don't use disruptor bolts. They use disruptor cannons. Because I actually think they're the most Maesron-like of the Alpha Octant empires, even though they don't exist.
Sadly, I'm not familiar with the Carnivons.
Yeah. So basically, a disruptor cannon it's a 2-turn arming weapon, and each standard shot is almost roughly about as powerful as an overload shot for a disruptor bolt. But the disruptor cannon can itself overload. I think it's an extra 50% on top, but you have to use warp power to do the overload. And so and also because the Carnivons have those heel nippers and stuff, because there's no real equivalent of a heel nipper,
right,
unless you count the Belusco tractor tricks and stuff. So I guess for the Carnivon, it's even more so than the Maesron that they're leaning on their direct fire weapons and stuff, because they've got that heel nipper trick and stuff where they can really mess things up for their opponent if the opponent has L and R warp engines, because like if you're flying the Gorn ship, you can't force them to turn, but you can still damage the warp engines using the heel nippers. So, but yeah, basically the dynamic in this situation might not be necessarily all that different if you're fighting an empire that uses disruptor bolts and drones, because I mean both the Maesron and Carnivon, they're not necessarily fighting every turn, unless you decide to split your tachyon gun or disruptor cannon fire. Whether you want to do that is another story. But you're basically thinking in terms where you're basically planning every second turn. What range do you want to be with your heavy weapons, and how do you want your seeking weapons to support that or not? So,
right.
Yeah. But, I mean,
that's why I said, if with a phaser defense module, it would actually make for a less powerful missile. So you're giving that up. So it might have armor of 8 and explosion of 8. So it's easier to phaser down. It doesn't do much damage, but at least it has some drone defense to it. And I thought that was kind of reasonable. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I say, I mean, like, maybe try to build the same missile, but use the historical modules where you can basically, like, it's not as efficient. Like, you have to use up 2 size points per phaser 3, but at least then it would basically have it. It would fit the rule. It would fit the rules as they exist for the historical.
Okay. I did consider that, but think about this. The problem is that you have to pick the targets before you launch the missile. And that's the problem, is that if you launch a missile and somebody launches a drone against it, those phasers can't be targeted on that drone. That's the problem.
Is that the same that other empires have with swordfish drones?
Yes. You have to pick the target. And I don't think the swordfish can be used to defend the drone.
Right, it can't have its self-defend, defend itself, basically.
Right.
So what you have to do is you'd have to basically wait for the other guy to launch drones, and then launch your TM, and then wait for the myopic zone to clear, and then wait for the drone, if it's still in flight, to get close enough for the missiles, phasers to shoot at.
And there's a very easy counter to that. You basically hold one drone rack in reserve, and you wait till you launch the other drone rack early in the turn, and at the end of the turn, in Impulse 28, you launch the second drone rack.
And
because you know that there's a myopic period of 4 impulses. By the time you can fire the tachyon missile and get through the myopic zone, the other side of the rack has cycled. So you can still fire both drone racks every turn, but you always have one ready to fire before the tachyon missile can hit you.
Now, okay. I'm just going to bring it up one last time, and I'll let it go.
Okay. I know.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to say, Barry? There are no drone racks in the Omega. Really?
I know.
So you are giving an example that if you stick to the historical empires that faced each other, or at least had a chance to face to each other,
yeah,
you don't have to worry about that, the whole idea of drones, because the drones were built for the Alpha Octet, not the Omega. The Omega didn't, a lot less seeking weapons.
I know.
The missiles that were there were more powerful, but they didn't have as many.
I know that's exactly.
So giving an example which uses drones, in my mind, is kind of pointless. The only reason that would even come into play is if you try to integrate the two, and I don't think it's possible to integrate the two.
Well, in fairness, I mean, if you're talking about the Lesser Magellanic Cloud or Triangulum for that matter, they don't have drones either. So it's a question of whether or not you'd have to put like a little kind of a exclamation point or an asterisk on the SSD for the tournament ship and say, oh, by the way, if you're up against a Kzinti tournament cruiser, then too bad. But so I don't know. I mean, like I suppose what you could do is you could basically do it so that if you're fighting against a Kzinti ship or like a Black Shark, whatever like that, then your TA racks are now TC racks, so you can fire both per turn. So, I mean, if you're really, but because TC racks do exist historically, and some of the empires, I guess, I mean, technically, you could do up a Zosman cruiser that had those, but then you'd have to give up your heavy weapon firing. But in this instance, I mean, wasn't there some sort of rule for the Andromedan where the TRHs, the TR beams count as heavy TRs if you're fighting a civil war or something like that?
Yeah,
yes,
actually,
they do.
Yes, actually, I need to discuss that with Mr. Petrick. Honestly,
yeah,
because having a Andromedan ship with only 2 TRLs to fight against people, I got my butt beat by Klingon. I mean, I didn't even have a chance. I got 8 points of damage on his shields. That's all I got before he killed me. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, I know.
For me, one of the reasons why that happened was because of the Klingon was so flexible because it has those disruptors. What did he do the first turn? He let me come in. I hit his shield, and what happened on that shield? The shield had 16 points of reinforcement on it because he put all that
power into
reinforcement. And there was a time where actually I got him to range 3. And I decided not to fire. You know why I decided not to fire? Because he was going speed 0. And I figured if I fired a single blast, it would done absolutely, totally nothing. No damage to him whatsoever. So it was pointless to even fire a weapon at him. And unfortunately at that point also I had all his drones got this massive drones, 6 drones coming in at me. So at the same time I can't really.
And you only have 6 P2s. That's not going to stop them.
Yeah. I could have fired 4 P2s and 2 TRLs at range 3, and I might have gotten a couple dings off his shield, but that's about it. With 2 TRLs, I need to get 2 good hits on the same shield just to get internals. What's wrong with this picture?
Did you tell me before that the tournament crate doesn't have a displacement device, or that it does and you can't offensively displace an enemy ship?
I can't offensively.
You can only use it on yourself,
and only can go to 6 hexes.
Yeah, that.
I can't go 12.
Yeah, because what I think is, I think you should be able to use it offensively, because then you could say to an empire using speaking weapons, all right, well, you want to build up 6 drones? Well, there goes your trucking.
No, Gary, that's the one thing you're wrong. Yeah. It wouldn't change that at all, because of it for the things that are targeted on you by that ship. They don't lose tracking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why it's like, okay, why can't I displace my opponent? It's not like they're gonna lose tracking on their drones. They don't, because of the rules.
That made no sense why they limited the Andromedans. The Andromedans have been screwed over with the tournament rules. There's no doubt about it.
I understand the
and every time you try to fix that, Paul, Petrick is blocking you.
Yeah, well,
I understand your frustration there.
Right. Oh, and I understand Petrick's issues because he got bitten. He did something silly and gave the Saltorian 2 additional phaser 1s because everyone says, oh, it needs more weapons, because it's really, it's chinky, And what happened? It totally it killed, It had the 2 web breakers, but it had 10 phaser 1s and 4 particle cannons. Can you say this killer? Right. And I remember the only reason I remember that is because what happened? I was playing by email tournament, and guess what? I got to face. I got to face in the original, tier heavy, 2 tier heavies, 6 phaser 2s, 6 batteries, the whole 9 yards. Andromedan versus a Saltorian with 10 phaser 1s. And I died really quick. And of course,
of course.
And of course, really quickly, Steve Petrick reversed himself. And unfortunately, the damage was done for when it comes to the tournament I was playing in. It's like, thanks, a little late. Because this was played by email. So
I know.
In which case, we went with whether it was the current sanctioned ship at that time. And if the sanctioned ship changed between round 1 and round 2, you changed your ships.
Remember that one year where they put out a new Win Aux cruiser that was really, really powerful? And it wiped the tournament?
Oh, no. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Not quite.
Yeah.
Not new.
Yeah, and then there was a Klingon that did actually win, and they called him, and I think he named his ship the Windslayer.
That wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's basically, it was before they limited the number of phaser Gs you actually could mount on a Win to only 1.
Right.
You could mount 2 phaser Gs. It's killed.
Yeah.
But that, so yeah, the bandy. No, I can't say twins because it was father and son.
Well, here's a thought then. What if instead of having a standard Andro, like a single ship, you could basically say, because your average tournament cruiser is about 150 points BVV on average, right?
About that.
That's the goal, give or take.
Give or take, yeah. It's adjusted because of the fishbowl.
So what if you basically have a setup where, like a special setup, where 2 standard tournament cruisers face a conquistador and a satellite ship?
That would be interesting, but that wouldn't be tournament style. It wouldn't be the dual.
Yeah, tournament is 1 ship versus 1 ship.
Yeah, dual. And the crate, for the most part, it was designed after the Conquistador. It just got trimmed down a little bit when it comes to number of hull boxes and things like that. Because if you actually look at the crate actually still has a hanger. Which reminds me, I have to fix that in the SSDs. Because currently the hanger is actually a hittable box. And it's not. Per se.
Right.
At least for a tournament. Well, it is, but it isn't.
The crate is a ship that they put it in the tournament, and nobody's ever. It's always considered, that's the weaker ship. I know you've played it a number of times, Paul, but how often have you won a tournament?
Since they nerfed it. Since they nerfed it, never.
Yeah. That's what I thought. So that's telling me that it's obviously too weak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I have to talk to Patrick.
Yeah.
I've meant to send out an email a couple of weeks ago, and I still have not done it. And I'm going to see if I can convince him to, at the very, very least, leave the batteries alone. Yeah, the 3 batteries, which sucks, but I understand defensively that kind of makes it harder. For it limits what the Andromeda can do, and I kind of agree with that. But I think it needs either additional TRL or convert the 2 TRLs to TRHs. Actually, what I'd really like is to have 4 TRLs, but that's me. Well, 4 TRLs would be great because then you still have around the same amount of damage, a little weaker, tiny bit weaker than the 2 TRHs. But you also have better internals. So
Well, yeah.
that's
Aren't there the mothership variants that do trade in their TRHs for more TRL so they can do work against fighters and gunboats?
yeah. Usually it's some of them is what they yeah they would trade in like half their TRHs to TRLs. Yes,
that could be an option where I guess if the Andro is expecting to be in a seeking weapon heavy environment and stuff or something, but anyway, well, actually, sorry, I'm just gonna. I think we're way off track here. But
understood.
What was I going to say?
Hey, we chase our rabbits, you know.
Module C6 as well?
What's that?
Or you could
do you have
go to
module
the C?
Yeah, I have module C6.
Do you think that? I mean, well, I'll get Barry as well. Would it be worth having a look at the Carnivons in a future episode, or do you guys already have something planned for the next few episodes worth?
We don't have anything planned for next week.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about either Praevians or the Carnivons.
I don't have module C6.
I can send you the PDF because I bought the online edition. Also, I have an actual physical copy too, so I can kind of.
Well, there is a sample PDF that has on the Warehouse 23 that has the war cruisers for both empires and stuff. That just gives like a flavor of it. And also for anyone who's into FC, there is an FC well, it's not a preview PDF they call it, which has 3 Carnivon ship cards and 3 Praevian ship cards. So those might be worth checking out for anybody who's interested in stuff.
I have P6, but not C6.
Yes, it's module C6. Yeah, P6 is the playtest stuff.
The Galactic Smorgasbord.
Yeah. I like that. I like the Galactic Smorgasbord. It was, and also like the.
What is in it?
The P6 or C6?
It's got Praevians. It's got Voodoo. It's got Mega Phasers. Hispalians, the Flivver, the Deltons, the Fenians.
Flivver. That's not C6. That's C4.
Module X2, second generation ships. What the heck?
Well, that stuff has been decanonized, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Because whatever the real module X2 is going to look like, it won't look anything like that.
Yeah, I got that one. That was one of those ones that basically it was a quick X2 module, which then they went, this does not work.
Yeah, I bought module X2.
Oh, me too.
So they're just describing it. There's no SSDs or rules.
Right.
Yeah. But, okay, so, yeah, I do not have C6.
Yeah, I can kind of lend you my copy of C6.
Now, I will tell you that module, the LMC tournament cruisers, they just work. In fact, Ken Burnside created several LMC tournament cruisers, and I basically copied them direct into Starfleet Battles Online, and we tested them out, and they just worked perfectly. No modifications required. It was awesome.
I do remember we were talking about the Jamokian new light cruiser from I think the CL-48 or something like that. Because I don't think they have a pre-existing one. Yeah. Oh, one other thing as well is, did you guys ever talk about the Triangulum Galaxy stuff?
No, we're not talking about Triangulum.
Yeah, because
I do have that module.
Yeah. So if for what it's worth, there's 3 of the empires are in that module, yes, and then there's a 4th empire, playtest empire, that are in Captain's Log 23. They're called the Imperium. So the Helgardians, the Arachnids, and the Malarans are in. Well, actually, one thing that's interesting is that the Malarans, I think they have the ram torpedo. It's actually sort of like the way you have the with the Sigvirions, where I think the ram torpedo, I don't think it's the warhead. I think it's the speed of the torpedo. It actually speeds up after it's launched and then slows down again. Mm-hmm. So it's another one of those kind of weird, it's really meant to be targeted at planets and bases sort of thing and stuff. And you can't turn with them either. They can only sidestep.
Yeah, but at the same time, speed doesn't really matter that much to me. The important thing is how much damage. Because that's
because the speed damage is a multiplier of the speed.
Oh,
like it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's kind of weird like that, because it's like the Hellguardians, they brought these little kind of like rotating shields, like weak versions of what the Juggernaut has. Then the Arachnids, they can assimilate other empires, not as well as the Sigs can, but you wouldn't really see that in a tactical level or whatever. But their plasmas actually got, because there's another. I don't know if you remember a while back, I mentioned that there's a 2011, errata file for module C5, which modifies some of the rules there. There is a similar file from 2011 for the Triangulum Galaxy material. Right. So that might be worth looking at as well. And that significantly nerfed plasma weapons that the Arachnids have. So that might be a problem there. But the Imperium...
getting back to Andromedans, though, we should probably take one from the C3A module.
Oh, man.
Give the Andromedans their P1s.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Hey, well, they need them. Tell me I'm wrong.
Lord... Barry, if the Andromedans had phaser ones, they would have taken over the galaxy. You know?
Well, I'm talking about for the tournament.
Yeah, I know. But,
because it only has 16 ones.
Right,
I mean,
the thing is...
That's still...
Well, but that really does change things drastically if you change the phaser 2s to phaser 1s, mainly because of the amount of damage that the phaser 1s can do versus phaser 2s, especially in the case when you're not fighting anything with a large number of seeking weapons. Or you're fighting plasma, because plasma it would kill plasma. Freaking kill it is what it would do. Any plasma race, it would kill. Totally. Because it could outrun the plasma versus... the drones keep going. For 3 turns they keep going.
Yeah.
So you're constantly running them out, and it's not costing the thrower any energy whatsoever. While plasma, those ships, they have to slow down because they have to recharge their weapons.
Yeah. Although plasmas are very efficient. It's the most efficient heavy weapon out there.
Oh, understood. Of course, my opponent, David, I already told you, basically the main reason I won that one was because he completely whiffed an alpha at range, I think it was range 6. Yeah, range 6. He bolted all 4 plasmas and missed with all 4 plasma.
Oops.
Yeah, that kind of did not help things at all for him. So, anyway, okay. Well, it's getting late. We need to wrap it up here. We'll see.
Yes, we do.
We'll see if we can do Carnivons next week. I'll make sure that you get a copy of the rules, Barry. Just don't give them off.
Okay.
Don't give them to anybody else.
I won't.
Okay. So, with that, Barry, Gary, you both have a good night.
Good night.
And to you, good night, everyone.
So, had a nice discussion about the Maesrons again. As pointed out, I still disagree with Barry when it comes to the whole drone thing. It's like there's no drones in Omega, so it is what it is. And of course, we chased down the Andromedans, and I agree. Thanks for pointing that out, because I need to really get myself in gear and actually talk to Mr. Petrick about that, because of, at the very least, give it another TRL. Give it at least a fighting freaking chance. I like to actually have an extra battery too. But I'm gonna be reasonable, because as Paul Scott himself, pointed out, it's not the offensive weapon. It's not the power, which is which was always been the problem with the Andromedans. It's the ability to basically to clear the panels and have that large defensive ability again very quickly versus any other empire, any other ship out there. And that's the cause. And that's why getting it down to 3 batteries is you want to talk about the toughest opponent with 3 batteries is the Hydran. It's nuts. In fact, we talked about an option way back when, which is like 2 batteries, but they get an energy module. And the one thing I've always liked about the idea of adding an energy module to the Andromedan crate has been that you could actually tweak it relatively easily in a tournament. You could tweak it to be 5 versus 10 versus 15 or whatever. And it's like at the first go around, it gives the Andromeda one shot to take the first hit and come back. But the second time, it ain't gonna be able to shake it off hardly at all. And also gives it, a kind of a quote unquote defensive tertiary weapon, secondary weapon, so that there's a target for something other than the ship itself. But that's another podcast. And with that, I bid you a good night.